All right. Thanks everyone for joining us for the Empirical Enlightenment podcast. I'm here with Kaedrich Olsen. Is that a Viking name? Sounds like a
It's
Viking.
it's Danish.
It's
That's
Danish.
for sure. Yeah.
Okay. I'm Danish too. So we've got the SEN,
Perfect.
Andersen, Olsen. What does Olsen mean?
Son of Ola.
Son of Ola?
Yep. In
Who?
the Norse cultures, people tended to be named, patronymically after the father. So you'll find Ola's son or Sven's son, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I was wondering. Does Ola is that a person's name, or is it
Yeah.
just a okay? Yeah, Ander is Andrew Andersen, but apparently it means warrior too. So I just pretend I'm son of the warrior here. So,
Perfect.
and I've got my berserker skin on. So I'm going to channel some of our Viking ancestry here for this podcast to overcome my social anxiety.
I'm
But
right there with you.
great. So my background is I have a PhD in physiology and pharmacology, and I kind of think that these people are modern day witches. You should have seen the stuff I had to do to poor animals while I was doing my research. It's probably similar to a witch, but anyway, I kind of want to talk about Viking mysticism, Viking mythology. I know very little about it, and so I'm probably going to let you do most of the talking. But primarily, I want to talk about kind of how we can channel that in the modern age. So, like, let's say I want to go into a board meeting. I'm about to sell something. How do I channel that Viking energy? Do I need to take some mushrooms or yeah, how can we use that to benefit us right now?
Absolutely. It's really mindset. It's the mindset that you're going into. And for these kind of cases, I would look at the warrior archetype. The warrior archetype is very structured, very disciplined, very much into order, but it is for a greater cause, for a greater purpose. So they will take that time to train. They will take that time to set a routine for themselves, the daily morning routine, the daily work routine. And when they know there's a big board meeting coming up, they'll prepare for it. They'll do all of the little pieces and parts that they need to put that together. And one of the interesting aspects of the warrior archetype is the mature warrior does not need to prove anything to anybody. So they tend to be quieter, they tend to talk slower, they tend to talk deeper. And one of the interesting aspects about the mature warrior is they're willing to take a look at their flaws, their faults, where they are weakest at. And so, in preparing for the board meeting, you need to analyze yourself. Where do you suck? What is it that you're not doing so good?
I like that.
And reach out to the people that have strength in those areas to shore up your work that you are doing so that when you go into this board meeting, you are fully prepared. You've got the alliances built that you need to back you up, and you are ready to go to answer any questions, to cover any objections, and to overcome any potential pitfalls that could happen along the way.
I like that a lot. So focus on your weaknesses because those are what will probably get you, huh?
Exactly. And be willing to look at it. You see, the immature warrior are those guys that are on the road trying to get to the red light before everybody else. So they're weaving in and out of traffic. They've got something to prove. Those are the guys that go to the board meeting. I got this. I'm going to do this. And I'm going to kick ass doing it. And then they suck at it. The mature warrior goes, okay, here's where I'm going to suck. Here's the things that I'm not good at. How do I find help for that?
That's brilliant advice. And it seems obvious, but people don't think about it. They're like, oh, these are my strengths. I'm just going to present my strengths and not worry about the weaknesses. And then when the weaknesses come up, that's when you get nailed to the wall. And who cares about your strengths at that point? Yeah.
Exactly.
During my PhD, we'd have to present to the entire department once a semester. And yeah, there'd be people that would get up there and they would pick you apart and try and find your weaknesses. And so maybe that's the Viking in them. But there are people who clearly didn't focus on the weaknesses. They just focused on the strengths. And then when, the saboteur or whatever came out, it was game over. Like people would break down into tears and all these things. It was so sad, but it's necessary, right? Because it was kind of like a training course. Because when you go out into the real world, that's all people do, right? They rarely look at your positives. They just look at the negatives, unfortunately, which is an unfortunate part of human nature. But here we are. So, like I said, so my background's in physiology and pharmacology. So I don't know if you're going to be able to answer this legally or otherwise. But what about like? So I know we don't know for sure what the berserkers took
Correct.
before going into battle, whether it was Amanita muscaria or henbane or some of these other things. But what do you think of psychoactive substances to improve yourself? Do you think that's a good idea, or do you think that's a bad idea?
It's a fair question. The way I've always approached psychoactive substances is I look at the exogenous versus endogenous.
Okay.
Sometimes we need the exogenous help to better help us understand what it feels like, what it that experience is. But we have to remember that all of the neuroreceptors we have, the only reason why the exogenous chemicals work is because we have those neuroreceptors.
That's a good
And
point.
those neuroreceptors mean that there's an endogenous chemical, there's an endogenous opioid, there's endogenous DMT. And we can engage in certain practices to engage those. An interesting example is reality therapy, a reality theory choice therapy by William Glasser. He was a psychiatrist and a psychologist. So he would prescribe the medications and then work with the patient to find out what actions they took, what behaviors they did that reinforced those chemical states that they would naturally produce. So then he would start to wean them off of the medication because they would now start to endogenously produce those chemicals for themselves. And that's
Wow.
my approach to psychoactive chemicals, to plant medicines. And I will be upfront and honest here. I am super sensitive to these.
Oh
Like
yeah,
with
me too.
20 milligrams of cannabis, I can fully visually and audibly hallucinate.
Oh wow, yeah,
And
me
so
too.
I
Yeah.
I cannot take anything. I cannot do psilocybin. I can't do DMT, any of those kind of things because I'm just too sensitive for it. But that said, I do have meditative practices. I do have spiritual work that I do that gets me into very similar states of consciousness because I know how to produce those chemicals endogenously.
Yeah, and you're already so sensitive to it. Maybe you don't need that exogenous heavy dose
Exactly.
of material. Yeah, yeah. I am really curious about how the berserkers psyched themselves up and became immune to pain, and which part of it is myth and which part of it is lore. I do want to find a way to channel that. It's too bad that the Vikings, they had runes, but as far as writing things down, that was the colonizing Christians, right? That wrote down their histories.
That's very good. And I'm glad that you brought that up because, yes, in the I would say from the year zero, if not the year 1000 BC, runes were in use
Oh
and
wow.
then became forbidden by the 1300s. 1400s, they were pretty much gone in favor of Latin script.
Oh okay.
And with that said, the only time runes were really used was really like shipping tags. They were used for magical purposes, blessing weapons for health, that sort of thing. And on rune stones, they were commemorating a loved one, if not the self, for some of the deeds that they did. So we don't have much in the way of runes from the actual Vendel period and Viking period. But the Latin script of what was going on during that time was written down hundreds of years afterwards
Oh
by
no. Yeah.
really by Christians who were very careful about what they wrote down, and they still modified it to fit the accepted narrative at the time period. Because you have to remember the Roman Catholic Church at that time period was against anything that was different.
Yeah.
And so they had to be very careful. So we can't trust the literature. The literature is a great starting point, but we can't trust it. But if we can find archaeological remains that support, or even contemporary literature, because you see, the Norse were all over Europe. They served a long time in Turkey, in Constantinople. They were part of the Varangian Guard. They were
Oh,
the people who settled Ukraine and Belarus. They were all throughout Europe. They were the Goths that were part of the Visigoth movement that you
I
saw
didn't know
in
that.
Spain.
Yeah.
Yep. They
Yeah.
were all of these people. So they brought that with them. And so the contemporaries people would write about the Norse people and some of their practices. But interestingly enough, some of the best sources to know what they did come from the law books, from the Christians, that would say you can't go out to a crossroads. You can't do these certain ceremonies at these times of year. You can't do these kind of practices. And that actually told us what some of the heathen practices were before they were
Uh,
outlawed.
just you could look at the thou shalt nots
Exactly.
and just figure it out from there. Do some deductive reasoning.
Exactly.
So I don't want you to give away your secrets or your business, but I kind of do.
Yeah.
So what's the secret to of Viking power? Like how? I mean, because we can't really know too much, but it sounds like you're onto things. You seem like a successful person marketing it and things like that. What's what's the secret?
Truthfully, it's believing in yourself.
Believing in
Even when the
yourself.
world is against you, knowing that what you're doing is right for you, and when you tap into what your purpose is, when you tap into what is right for you, and you do that unapologetically, unabashedly, you just go forth. And yes, it's going to piss some people off. It's going to really push some people away,
Yeah,
including loved ones and family members. And then you've got to be okay with that. You've got to be, that's fine. Because when you start to live that way, when you're living authentically without apology, you're just following your passion and your purpose, you will find people that will resonate with you and will support you.
that's really cool. Yeah, it's interesting how as social creatures we're almost like ants where we're pre-programmed to kind of go with the tribe and not be go against the grain. I lived in Japan for a while, and it's a source of their greatest strength. And I mean, I love Japan, Japanese, all of that, but I do feel that they're missing the balance. The phrase is you don't want to be the nail sticking above the board,
Ah,
and it makes Tokyo run amazing, right? But at the same time, like trying to be an individual and express yourself is hard over there, and so I do feel like it's it's something that at least in Western society people miss, and I missed for a long time, is that being different is almost better than being the best something, you know because following what you're good at, what your heart is, what you're interested in, and it can carry you really far. And not to get political, but I think that's all that Trump did. He's just he just he's just like, I'm just going to do whatever. I'm going to be myself, and I'm just going to go for it. And I'm not going to say anything positive or negative about him besides that. But I do feel like in business or in life or anything like that, that's brilliant advice. Is believe in yourself and don't let society decide things for you, because you're going to get the same results as everyone else if you're doing the same things. And
exactly.
you really need to show uniqueness. And it's counterintuitive, because you think that, oh, if I do what everyone else is doing, people will like me or whatever, and maybe people won't hate you, you know but you're not going to rise above, and you're not going to find out who your true self is if you do that. So I think that's really cool advice. So on a completely different topic, um, I want to talk about DMT.
Hmm.
um, I did DMT a couple years ago. I haven't done it since, and I saw elves coming out of the walls. And I'm a man of science or whatever. I've got my fancy degree or whatever. But not only were the elves coming out of the walls, there were shadow demons as well, and the mountain was breathing, and I saw my grandfather in the clouds. And so you're an expert in the paranormal. I can't explain these things scientifically. Seeing a mountain breathe like that, and I hadn't looked at the history of DMT or anything like that before I took it. And my friend who gave it to me was like, I want you to go in fresh, so you're not biased. And then I looked it up, and yeah, not everybody, but a lot of people see those elves, right? These paranormal creatures. And it's so strange that they were elves, almost like elves, fairies. They had the triangular hats and everything, right? Which is nuts. But and it totally makes sense now how, like, the fairy ring with the mushrooms and stuff like that. But anyway, as a master of the paranormal, what are your thoughts on this mystical realm that we can hack into with drugs or meditation or breathing? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. The way I look at it is there's a common phrase that's bandied about in a lot of the New Age and spiritual communities is that we're spiritual beings having a physical experience. I reject that. We are spiritual and physical beings having a
Okay.
dynamic experience. They're intertwined. There's no chicken and egg scenario. They are one and the same. And that is true for us individually. That is true for the world around us. There is no veil between the worlds. The only thing that has happened is because of our societal and cultural programming, we've cut ourselves off from that. And we can actually follow the history of that happening throughout the world, where indigenous traditions were replaced by Christian traditions, and Christianity really stamped that out. And then when we moved into sort of like the materialist reductionist theories, that really pushed it out even further because we don't have an empirical basis for what seems to be only anecdotal evidence. And it's true because these experiences are completely subjective to
Yep.
everybody. And that is one of the things that fascinates me about DMT is DMT and near-death experiences both have a commonality between all of the people who have experienced those. They all say the same things, and that is
Yeah.
mind-blowing to me. To me, that almost, I know it's not quite there, but is almost empirical that there is something else going on.
Oh, for sure. It's definitely empirical, in my opinion. I mean, but coming from the scientific world, anything you can get that's reproducible, whether it's like uh, SSRIs or any kind of drug, like anything, we'll take anything, because it's really hard to get that data. So anyway, sorry, I interrupted you. I agree. I think it's empirical. The fact that it's reproducible is crazy, like, and it's like you said, it's different depending on the person. Different people, like my grandpa, when he was passing, he saw his parents and he was talking with them and all these things. And so, and that's very common, right? And it's like, why that? Why that? It's just really, really interesting. But
It fascinates the heck out of me too. It makes me wonder. And one of the things I teach about interacting with the paranormal is every paranormal experience is co-creative, meaning we have our own conscious interpretation. In a sense, the visceral nervous system is where I equate to be the heart of our intuitive reception, where we receive intuitive information, and it comes through as abstract information, which the neocortex and the prefrontal cortex are really quick to reject. Even the reticular activating system wants to go, no, this is nonsense. I have no pattern in
yeah,
which to compare this with. It's nonsense. I shut it down. And with our cultural and societal upbringing, we tend to shut it off. Here's this abstract information. It's nonsense. But when we can shut down the prefrontal, when we can sort of shut down that cognition, the linear cognition, and be aware of this abstract information coming in, it is all symbolic. There's a symbolic reference to it. So, in a sense, that information comes into the heart of our intuition through the visceral nervous system. It will communicate through the body, which is why pendulums and muscle testing and muscular movements are very interesting to me. But when it gets to the brain has to make sense out of it. And in order for that to make sense in a context, it has to pass through the imagination filter, We have to
Yeah.
give it context with what we're familiar with that information already. So some people will be having a very profound experience and go, nah, I just made it up. It was just my imagination. I'm like, it is. And you were interpreting information that you're receiving in a context so that you can understand it. And
That's fascinating.
and so when you're having that experience, you may have seen your grandfather. He may have been there and you're interpreting it. And when you're seeing the elves coming through with the pointy hats and everything, that also may be a symbolic interpretation of the beings that you're seeing. Maybe you're seeing nature spirits, the spirits of the land, which is all throughout Scandinavian culture, all
Yeah.
throughout Germanic and European culture. I mean, it's so pervasive, we can't ignore just what may have been really lying there, but it is our subjective interpretation of that information is what gives rise maybe to the pointy hats or sometimes the wings or some of
Yeah.
those shapes, because it's what we understand it, and that's how we're giving context to the abstract information that we're receiving.
That's really cool. Yeah, yeah. It's like, because we're experts at pattern recognition, right? And so
Exactly.
once those drugs go into the brain, you start seeing some crazy things, and your brain starts trying to turn it into things that you're familiar with. Um, but going back all the way, who was the first person to see the elves? Um, because they had no context or whatever, So maybe that is what they look like. Um,
True.
I'm not sure.
True. That would have happened in the Paleolithic times, long before they even knew what writing was, but it would have been passed down orally over the generations. And we know how oral traditions go with like the telephone game. So things kind of get modified
Yeah,
and
over
transmuted
history.
until you have a personal experience. And you go, oh, this is what they're referencing. I get it
Yeah,
now.
yeah. I like what you said about how you have to free your mind, and like you have to give your imagination something to work with, because if you block it, it's not going to work. And what's interesting is I keep relating all these things back to pharmacology, but there's drugs that are the same way. Like a lot of antidepressants, if you think that it's not going to work, it's not going to work. And so they use that same, like reduction of cortisol, opening up of the vasculature in the brain. They use that same thing, basically telling a person, hey, this is going to work. You'll be fine. And then they take it and they're like, hey, you're right. I am fine. But if they're, like push up against it and they're like, no, this is bogus. Same thing as a spiritual experience, you're not going to get those benefits, because you need to actually believe it to work. And that pathway in the brain, the placebo effect or whatever you want to call it, it needs to turn on for the drug to work. And relating that to a lot of these spiritual experiences, where I think with DMT it's going to happen no matter what, but with that endogenous thing that you spoke of, um, for those things to turn on, you're actually going to need to believe it, which is crazy, right? But we are what we are, and I think that's the first step of accepting that, like you said, we're spiritual creatures, and once you accept that and acknowledge that and feed that, that's where you can get the happiness and the joy that comes from all those studies who say that religious people are happier. It's because they're allowing that part of the human mind, the human soul, to open up and be who we truly are you know
Exactly. It's what I call the believing seeing dynamic. If you believe it a little bit, you see it a little bit. And that seeing it a little bit reaffirms that belief, which means you believe it a little bit more. It's like a door that's just barely open. And now you're opening it a little bit more every time you look through that door until it becomes concrete to you. It becomes like, well, of course, this is the way things are. And that's where meditation, ceremonies, and rituals, and even plant medicines can come in. Because in those liminal time periods, in those liminal spaces, we can sort of set aside our belief and our expectations. We can sort of put away, like, well, nope, this isn't the way things work. Maybe this is the way things work. And when you have that, where you can set aside your beliefs and your expectations just for a moment, that door opens just a little bit and you peek through it and you're like, oh, there was something there.
There it is.
And then you can start moving back and forth and building that dynamic until it just becomes like, well, this is a way things are. This is how it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny. It's similar to wanting to fit in, where it's counterintuitive, where you think the opposite. You're like, "Oh, this is nonsense." Um, like the logical brain will fight it. And same with wanting to fit in. It's like the logical brain is like, "No, I need to do this." And it's funny. It's like once you start doing the opposite, that's when you start getting rid of those, anxieties, the stresses of trying to, fit in with everybody, and the anxieties of, um, you know, leaning so heavily on your logical mind. Um, Letting logic be your god, it can be a real problem, right? Because logic can lead you to all sorts of weird places. And so ironically, right, rather than the spiritual side, where it can lead you to kind of an inner peace, happiness, where you can find yourself. It's like I said, it's a lot of things in nature and in life, at least. um, the opposite is true. And I unfortunately, and I don't know if it's like a control thing where people are trying to manipulate you into, you know being a good person, or a good, maybe good person is the wrong thing, but being a good citizen, being easy to manipulate, being easy to control, that kind of stuff. Or if it's just, I don't know, just a natural consequence of us being social animals. But so many things, the opposite is true of what you think. And it's sad, because it's like that movie Falling Down. I don't know if you've
Hmm.
seen that,
Yeah,
where
Michael Douglas.
yeah, yeah, where he's like, I'm the bad guy. He's like, but I did everything they told me to do. Um, it's kind of like that, where you think like, oh, if I do everything that everyone tells me to do, everything's going to be fine. But it's the opposite a lot of the time. It's you'll never really achieve inner peace or happiness, or be as confident as you want to be, because you're always worried about social mores and all of
Yep.
that. But
I relate that back to Paleolithic programming. Back 100,000 years or more ago, when we were hanging out around fires and there were, tall grasses around us and there were predators in the tall grass, your survival meant being accepted by the group.
yeah.
If you were cast out, there were predators out there to get you. And
Yeah.
so that became reflected in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where we have to fit in, we have to be connected. And the loved ones around us, they really do want the best for us. And that means to fit into their understanding of the way
Yeah.
things work. And that's one of the tricky things is the culture and the societies that we're born into, that's all we knew. That's exactly how the world works, and there's nothing different. And then we see somebody on the other side of the planet that has a completely different sense of reality. Their reality is truth too. But that is, to me, one of the biggest hallmarks of spiritual growth and cognitive development, consciousness advancement, if you will, is that discernment,
Yeah.
that ability to contrast, like, ooh, here's what my reality seems to be, but their reality is true as well. And so that you could look at both of those and see them as sort of a paradox. How can these two completely contradictory cultures be both correct? And then when you start to resolve that paradox, when you really start to balance that contrast, you up a level. You
Yeah.
start to see that the truth of that, and you go, well, what is really causing those things to be real? And it tends to be our own conscious perception of reality and how things work. And then you realize, wait, this is mutable. It isn't fixed. We can change that. That means I can change. That means if I change my inner world and my ability to perceive the world around me changes. And then you level up again.
Yeah. Yeah. You take these these social mores, or your culture, your tribe, or whatever, and you see the good in it, and you take the good, but you don't have to necessarily take it as gospel or dogma for you personally, right? That's,
Correct.
like you said, that's when you level up, when you realize that, hey, there's other cultures and societies out there, and there's a lot of good stuff, and maybe whatever works for me now might not work for them, and vice versa.
Exactly. Everything is true. And if
Yeah.
everything is true, that means you get to define what is true for you.
Right. Right.
And test it and validate. That's another one of the key things.
Yeah.
Test and validate everything to see if it really works and if it really works for you.
Yeah. No, I agree with that 100%. And I think, like I said, we all have different DNA, and we both have, or we all have different epigenetics as well. I don't know if you follow epigenetics much, but
Absolutely, it's
really, you
fascinating.
do? Okay, yeah. Some of my undergrad work was on epigenetics, but anyway, I was reading a paper that came out not too long ago about children from I think it was the invasion of Ukraine from the Nazis, and they've still got that generational trauma. Like they're I need to go back and read specifically what it was, but they've got health conditions, problems, and it's those specific people who are descended from those Ukrainians that got raped and murdered and all these things, and their epigenome is different. So the genome on top of the genome, right? And I was thinking, as far as spirituality is concerned, I interviewed a woman who does Native American stuff and talks about generational trauma and that kind of thing. And yeah, as far as like getting in touch with your ancestors and all that stuff, literally, like their mark is still in you, epigenetically speaking. And so it's not some woo-woo pie in the sky thing. It's like it's a part of you, and those methyl groups, which are marking what parts of your DNA is red to turn into proteins and all of that, it's in you, So it's not just some abstract thing. It's literally what they did in life, and followed you all the way through hundreds of years, thousands of years, maybe. Who knows?
That's why an interesting bit of shadow work that I do with folks is what I call ancestral soul wound healing.
Oh, cool.
Is as you learn to do your own shadow work, and I do a spiritually based shadow work, as you're doing that sort of shadow work for yourself, you're clearing energy out, you're transmuting emotional states, you're clearing and rewriting beliefs. Then you can go to a deeper level. What seems to be generational? What seems to follow the family? Is there like a family curse? Is there a family blessing? What seems to go on? And then you do those same shadow work techniques at that ancestral level, and
Yeah.
you'll find what blows my mind is it not only helps the client individually, but they report back, mom and dad's starting to do things differently. My siblings are acting
Wow.
differently.
Yeah.
My kids now have a different approach to things. What's going on? I don't know the mechanics of it. I just
Yeah.
know the results of like, wow, this is very interesting that we can do ancestral healing by doing our own shadow work.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's kind of a black box. Actually, most drugs, at least drugs of the brain, are black box too. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but basically
Yes.
means, yeah. For people listening as well, it's like we don't know how it works, just that it does. And it's funny, in the pharmacology world, so many drugs are like that, especially nootropics and things like that, and antidepressants. It's like, well, we know something's going on in there, and so yeah, and it's funny, like you call it shadow work, and I was talking with a Tai Chi master as well, and he was saying something along the lines of these different energies and things that people can harness, and I and there's a couple of papers that I read in Nature, actually, which is like the creme de la creme journal, right? That
Mm-hmm.
was like they're trying to map those same energies, and they call it chi or whatever, right? But it's just your metabolic system, more or less. And getting back to the point where you were saying about shadow work, it's like it sounds mysterious, and it is. And a part of human nature is, kind of a longing for the mysterious and things like that. But it sounds like it's epigenetics, and
Yes.
dating back to our ancestors, it's like they didn't have names for these things. They didn't have microscopes. They didn't have, I mean, they had mice to test on, but there's only so much you could do without this fancy modern equipment. And so, they gave it the best name that they could, because it's like, oh, that's your shadow self. That's something following you around, and it kind of is. It's like
Mm-hmm.
the shadow cast from your ancestors onto you. I don't know if that's how you use it, but literally, maybe their village got raped and pillaged, or they got addicted to drugs, or something, and that's something you can see clearly when children come out addicted to drugs. Some of that's pharmacodynamics, and some of it is epigenetics, but they use the best words that they could to describe these things that they were seeing, these phenomenon, like miasma. Oh, it's bad air. That's why you got sick. They were doing their best, But a lot of this stuff, even though we can't really prove it scientifically right now, perhaps 10, 20, 100,000 years later, when equipment gets better, we can see oh, there's limbic resonance. We're passing energies to each other. There's literally your code got modified when your ancestor became king or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
so anyway, it's just fascinating that all these things, kind of going back to the DMT and the mushroom trip and getting transported to another dimension or whatever and seeing things, all of these things are based on anecdotal, empirical evidence that people saw over the centuries and millennia. And I think like you said, the results are there, we just don't know how.
Right.
And so I think it's going to get there, though.
An interesting example of that, in the Norse tradition, there's something called the Hamingya. And in Old Norse, Hamingya is translated as the repository of luck. In modern Icelandic, Hamingya basically means luck. And a person who has a good Hamingya seems to have really beneficial things happening to them on a regular basis. A person who is Hamingya Laos, without a Hamingya, bad things seem to happen to them.
They're cursed. Yeah.
And in one of the tales of Odin, Odin is not just seen as the Norse god, like the high god, the chieftain, the leader god, but in the lore, it is a man who traveled to Scandinavia from the Far East, who went all throughout the world, even built a city east of the Black Sea for the Shining Ones before finally coming into Scandinavia.
Oh,
And
cool.
it was said that he had the ability to steal a person's Hamingya. But when we really kind of decode this and we look at it, even from a modern lens and a modern context, what we can see is the Hamingya definitely could be an energy field around the body that affects probability of things coming to you, but it's affected by your personal belief in yourself and what you think you're worthy of, what you're capable of. Let's say it's a person who is going to go out and get a job. And they're going to go into this interview with a whole attitude of like, yeah, do you really want to hire me? I don't know. I've messed up these other jobs. I can't do it. There's no Hamingya. They're not going to get it. Another person could still have been fired from a previous job, made mistakes. They feel bad about it, but they took responsibility for it. They looked at it as, okay, yes, I've made these mistakes. Here's what I'm doing to fix them. They start to apply those techniques of fixing them, changing things. Now they go into this interview. Yes, I made these mistakes, and here's what I've done to fix it. Here's what I've learned from that. Here's where I'm going with it. Now they've got this whole different presence about them, and they're more likely to be hired. So where the Old Norse might have seen this as part of the soul, and it could still be an energy field in the soul, it is always affected by our belief in ourself, our belief in our worth, our belief in our capability. And when we do our inner work to change that, it's going to affect even just the micro behaviors that we have, the look on our face, the way we hold our eyes, the way we hold our head. And that will give feedback from other people in the way other people perceive us. And then people go, wow, you got lucky. And then you can go, well, maybe, but I did a lot of inner work, and it could be a numbers game. A person without Hamingya tries one time and says, see, I suck at this. I'm not doing it anymore. A person with Hamingya will try it 5, 10, 20 times and go, oh, there it is. I figured it out. And people go, wow, you got lucky. I'm like, no, I worked hard at this.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So he came from the Far East and came and was able to cure people of their bad luck. I don't know if you're familiar with this guy named Brian Johnson. He's this guy trying to live forever. Anyway, he does something called the Rejuvenation Olympics. And what that is it's basically looking at your methylation patterns, which is your epigenetics, right? So like there's something called hypermethylation and hypomethylation. Those methyl groups are basically like bookmarks on your DNA where your genes get unwound and turned into proteins, which turns you into you, right? And so if you have hypermethylation, you have too many of those bookmarks in the wrong place, right? And if you have hypomethylation, you have not enough bookmarks in the right places. And so basically they're scattered all over, right? So what he does is basically through clean living, some supplements, some drugs, that kind of stuff, is he's changing his epigenome, his epigenetics, those methylation patterns based on that. And I wonder if that guy coming from the Far East was kind of doing that, basically like changing your fate by modifying your epigenome through, whether it's breath work or I don't know, maybe he gave them drugs. Maybe he told them, hey, go run out in the sun every day for 30 minutes. And then that's going to fix your methylation patterns on your genome. And then your fate is changed, right? So this generational trauma, you can improve where you've got way too many methyl groups in the wrong spot, blocking your creativity, and basically preventing you from being your true self and who you are because of this generational trauma. Go and improve yourself, and there's different ways to fix your epigenome, basically remove the spots where there's too much and put spots on where they need to be. So basically fix the hypomethylation and the hypermethylation, and then you can change your fate.
When
And
you're
so
saying that, that makes sense to me, because Odin, the man, the god, everything above, all included, I should say, would have started various mystery schools, i.e., occult practices. Stuff that's hidden from the majority of people, that is given to a select body of students that are capable and ready to learn these things. Some of those would have been like the Bear Sarks with combat magic. There's a form of shamanism called Sather, which is going into an altered state of consciousness for prophecy, for shape shifting, for all sorts of magical practice, and including healing and abundance and the crops and that sort of thing. But the one that I specialize in is called Guldur, and that is runes. Not only were runes used for writing, but they are a way of tapping into like the inner world. Every rune has a meaning, has a different purpose. And so when you look at like the rune Fehu, it's where we get the letter F from, it's where we get the word fee from. So it represents value. And it's like the investment of time, effort, energy. It could be capital, the money that you put down on starting a business. It could be the time and effort that you spend studying, getting your degree. So that Fehu is that sense of value. And if you look inward and your value is like, I suck, I can't do anything, that's that epigenetic factor, right?
it's
Because
true. Yeah.
epigenetics is basically your emotional reaction to environmental factors. And if you think, well, I'm no good, I'm terrible, I'm just going to mess things up, nobody wants what I want, you're programming yourself that based on the environmental challenges that you faced, and boom, you're down. But
Yep.
now, if you start to focus on Fehu, it's like, no, look at the things I'm good at. Look at the successes I've had. Look at the things I know. Look at the things I can do. You bump up your value. You're going to be starting to change some of those epigenetic markers. And then that's going to affect how you present yourself to the world, and even your physical well-being, how your physical well-being presents, just by how you focus on that rune Fehu.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. So it's almost like a mental totem. Is that
Yes.
is that an accurate? So it's like you're focusing on that, and as humans, we need that. We need things that we can almost either physical or mental or just something that we can, because we live in a physical world, right? And so like just like, oh, I'm going to improve myself just by improving myself. It's like, no, that's not how we work as people. You need either outside forces or, like you said, inside forces, something to focus on, whether it's runes or religion or something, because your will is weak, unfortunately. And so
In fact, if we can look at ourselves as a complex being, I like the term mind, body, spirit complex. We are physical beings, so we do need a physical representation of these things. And so that's why the physical rune is good. But our mind, the way we think and feel about things, is so important. And in the work that I do, I see a direct correlation to our spiritual being and our emotional, mental well being. They're all connected. And so I have this model of what I call body and being, with the physicality and how you are in the world, how you're being in the world, the things that you're doing, psyche and soul, what your mental and emotional state is, as well as what your energetic state is. And when we look at ourselves as this complex being, we realize things like runes or other sacred alphabets, when we're even chanting like Hindu mantra, and we're looking at sacred symbols or sacred geometry. that really activates the whole being, the
Yeah.
whole mind-body complex of body, being, psyche, and soul. So when we're using these tools, we're activating all of us, not just like the mental or not just the physical, but all of us.
The entire essence. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I know that's another thing that's coming out. It's like altering brain waves, right? Like you can change to
Hmm.
the theta brain waves with certain chanting. And so that's another thing that's come out that it's like, oh, these monks sitting around all day going om om, like what a bunch of lunatics. No, it works, and that's something that evolved over 10,000 years. And it's unfortunate that it's that a lot of these things are getting lost to history and time. And it's kind of ironic that the Christians are the cause and the solution to all of this, because they're the ones who kind of conquered and stomped it out to begin with. But it sounds like the Vikings, they had a bit of a written language,
Yep.
but they didn't write everything down. It's like the Druids, right? I'm really
Yep.
fascinated with Druidism. Okay, yeah. So with the Druids, like their priests, they didn't write anything down, and that was part of their code. And it's like, so all we know is from Christianity and the priests, and they're obviously not going to paint them in the best light. They're like, oh, they sacrifice virgins on their stone altars in their sacred groves. And
Exactly.
so, but I mean, a lot of these things, who knows how long Druidism was around? The same thing with Viking lore. Like,
Well, here's something interesting. When let's pair some of that Druidism back to some of the sounds that cause altered states of consciousness. That in Newgrange, in the megalithic construction that is there, it's found that the inner chamber of Newgrange resonates at 111 hertz,
oh,
which
cool.
is the same as Malta, the hypogeum in Malta. And there are laboratory studies that show when a person is exposed to 111 hertz, it starts to shut down the parietal lobe, the prefrontal cortex, and it starts to help them engage in an altered states of consciousness where they are connected at a more spiritual level.
No way.
So there is something very interesting to that that is proven through peer-reviewed empirical data.
Yeah. Kind of shut off the super logical side and tap into your instincts and your spiritual third eye or whatever.
Exactly.
That's really cool. So, lastly, I want to talk about. I saw, I think it was on your website, about a Viking retreat. Did I read that right?
Hmm.
Can Was that something you're doing, or is that something you're helping sponsor, or
I'm a part of that. I'm a teacher for
you're a
that.
teacher for that?
Yeah, that's getting put together little by little. AJ's running that one. And Awaken the Viking, I believe, is the website on that, where you go to Norway, you basically kind of have sort of the Viking experience in Norway.
That's so
It's,
cool.
it's pretty amazing.
That's awesome. So, it's the Viking experience. Do you do much spiritual stuff, like Viking mysticism things, like a
That's my
Sayor?
specialty.
What is it called? Like while you're the
Sealer.
Sealer? Okay, yeah. Man, I
I
want to
don't
go to
do
that.
much Sealer.
I've got a newborn, so I can't. But next time I want to go. I seriously do. Like, that's so sweet. I've been to Europe, but I didn't hit the Scandinavian countries, so I need to do that. But when are you doing it?
He's got another one coming up later this year. I'm not. I don't quite remember where it's booked, but it's coming up later this year, like maybe June, July-ish, I
June, July.
believe.
Okay. Well, I'll put a link to that in the description. I'm going to try and hit the next one once my baby's not keeping me up all night and I don't. We can all go. We'll all get back in touch with our Viking roots. But all all right. Well, I've taken a lot of your time. I super appreciate you talking with me. Is there anything specific that you feel that I missed? We covered quite a bit, but anything you'd like to end on?
You know what's kind of fun is when we were starting to talk about what can we do to sort of access that Viking mentality, that Norse mentality. One of the things I like to do, and when I'm teaching men's group for tapping into sacred masculinity, one of the things I have them do is to get big, arms out, legs out, stomp, stomp around, grunt, do some like grunting and
That's
growling.
awesome.
Get in touch with your primal sense. If you've got a drum, just beat the drum, dum, 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 rah. Just get that vitality flowing and running through you. And when you're doing that with that sacred mindset, set and setting is everything when
Yeah.
it comes to plant medicine, when it comes to spiritual work, any of that kind of stuff. But you're doing that with that mindset that you're getting in touch with your own sacredness, your own sacred masculinity, your own primal essence. It will boost a lot of those endogenous chemicals that will help with confidence, that will help with that boldness, will help with resilience and fortitude. So if you do this 5-10 minutes a day, and I know it's kind of weird, so don't do it when you're standing in line at the bank or something like that.
Yeah.
Don't do it at work. But, in your own private time, just get big, get growly, get primal. Then you're ready to go out into the world with a lot more of a boosted confidence, a lot more of that edge, that ferocity that you need. And that'll help you tap in more into that sort of that Viking mindset that you can bring with you to the boardroom, that you can bring with you to clients, that will help to, boost sales potential, because you're not there going, yeah, would it be cool if you had this? You're like, you really need this because this is why, and this is what it's going to do for you. You've got that sort of Viking mentality into you because you boosted all of those biochemicals inside you just through those actions.
Pump them through your body. And if you don't try it, you won't know, And you teach a course on this too, correct? It's
pieces and parts of it. That is part of the Sacred Masculinity course that's going to be coming out online for the first time ever later this year. I'm going to be working on June, July timeframe for that one. But I've taught it in person. And when I do one-on-one client sessions with men that are looking to tap into sort of their masculine potential, when they're trying to wake their sacred masculinity, get sort of that connection, it is part of the training that I will do with one-on-one work.
That sounds really cool. Hey, when you get it done, let me know. I wanna look into it. That sounds really cool.
You bet.
That's something that I've been more interested in these days. Even just wearing this bear skin. I mean, it's fake, but it really did something. I know I sound like a crazy person, but no, it's simple acts, small things that can make a huge difference, and just things you don't think about. And
absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kaedrich. I really, really enjoyed our conversation, and hopefully I'll talk to you again soon. I'll put links to your course and the Viking expedition. Maybe I won't put that until I've signed up. Just kidding. I can't do that. But I really would go if I could.
It's great.
It sounds well so cool. I really, really want to try and host one next year too, because I want to go.
Nice.
All right. Well, hey, thanks.
This has been awesome talking with you too, man. I love these kind of conversations. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for humoring me. I'm not as spiritual a person as I'd like to be, but I'm figuring it out one day at a time.
Perfect.
All right. Hope we talk to you again soon.
Me too.
Bye.